I was sitting in the glass-walled conference room of Thompson Industries, watching my billionaire father-in-law, Richard Thompson, throw contract papers directly at my face while screaming, "You're fired," in front of 15 top executives and 3 major clients. My husband Marcus stood beside his father, arms crossed, that familiar, cruel smirk spreading across his face. The room fell silent. Every eye stared at me. I felt the heat of humiliation burning through my chest. Then something unexpected happened. I stood up, and one by one, every single executive rose and followed me out. 3 months earlier, I never could have imagined this moment would come. My name is Jody, and at 29 years old, I had built what I thought was the perfect life. As marketing director for Thompson Industries, I had just completed the most successful campaign in the company's recent history, boosting revenue by 37%, with my innovative social media strategy targeting millennials in the luxury goods market. The campaign had taken 8 months of careful planning, countless late nights, analyzing consumer data, and coordinating with teams across 4 different departments. I had personally negotiated partnerships with 12 influencer agencies, redesigned our entire digital presence, and created a brand narrative that resonated with younger consumers while maintaining the sophistication our established clientele expected. Marcus and I had been married for 3 years, and I genuinely believed we were partners in everything. He worked in business development at his father's company, handling client relationships and contract negotiations. We lived in a beautiful colonial-style house in the suburbs, complete with a 2-car garage and a garden I spent weekends tending. Our dinner conversations often revolved around work strategies, and Marcus always seemed genuinely interested in my projects and ideas. But looking back now, I can see the subtle changes that started around the time my campaign launched. Marcus began questioning why I needed to stay late at the office, asking detailed questions about which colleagues I was working with, and making offhand comments about how my ambition might be getting out of hand. At first, I dismissed these remarks as typical husband concerns about work-life balance. The questioning escalated when I started receiving recognition for the campaign's success. Industry publications featured articles about my innovative approach, and I was invited to speak at 3 different marketing conferences. Marcus's supportive facade began cracking when I won the National Marketing Excellence Award for Digital Innovation. Instead of celebrating with me, he spent the awards dinner complaining about the speeches being too long and suggesting we leave early. Around the same time, I noticed strange issues with my work computer. Emails I was certain I had sent would disappear from my sent folder. Client communications would be mysteriously deleted from my inbox. When I mentioned these technical problems to our IT department, they found no evidence of system malfunctions or security breaches. The technician, a friendly guy named Dave, even ran comprehensive diagnostics and assured me everything appeared normal. My relationship with Marcus grew increasingly tense as these work problems multiplied. He started accessing my laptop at home, claiming he needed to check his personal email because his phone was charging. When I suggested he use his own computer, he would become defensive and accuse me of being secretive about my work projects. These arguments became a weekly occurrence, usually ending with Marcus storming out of the house and returning hours later without explanation. The breaking point came when I discovered something that shattered everything I believed about my marriage and my career. While trying to recover a deleted presentation for an important client meeting, I decided to check my computer's trash folder more thoroughly. Hidden among typical deleted files, I found a series of emails that made my blood run cold. They were messages sent from my email account to Richard Thompson, but I had never written them. The emails detailed confidential marketing strategies I had developed, including upcoming campaign launches, client acquisition targets, and proprietary research data. Even more devastating, The messages included detailed information about our competitors' weaknesses and suggested ways Thompson Industries could exploit this intelligence. As I read through dozens of these fabricated emails, the horrible truth became clear. Marcus had been using my laptop to send these messages to his father, making it appear that I was the source of leaked information. The emails were crafted to make me look like I was engaging in corporate espionage, sharing sensitive data with unauthorized parties, and potentially violating confidentiality agreements with our clients. The most damaging discovery was a series of forwarded emails containing marketing strategies I had developed for upcoming product launches. These strategies had somehow reached 3 of our main competitors, who had then implemented similar campaigns weeks before our scheduled rollouts. My successful 37% revenue increase was being undermined by competitors who seemed to anticipate our every move. In the final email thread, I found Marcus had written to Richard, "The plan is working perfectly. Her credibility is shot with the clients, and the board is starting to question her judgment. A few more weeks of this and we'll have grounds for termination. She'll never see it coming, and by the time she realizes what happened, it'll be too late to prove anything." I sat in my home office staring at the computer screen, feeling like the foundation of my entire life had crumbled beneath me. My husband, the man I had trusted with my deepest fears and greatest ambitions, had been systematically sabotaging my career for months. He had violated my privacy, stolen my intellectual property, and manipulated his father into believing I was a corporate liability. The realization hit me that Marcus felt threatened by my professional success, while his business development role kept him in his father's shadow, handling routine client maintenance and relationship management. My marketing achievements had elevated my profile within the company and the industry. Instead of celebrating my accomplishments, he had chosen to destroy them. I printed every single email as evidence, stored copies on 3 different flash drives, and spent the night documenting everything I could remember about Marcus's suspicious behavior over the past 3 months. I knew I needed to confront this betrayal, but I also understood that Marcus and Richard had been planning my professional destruction for months. They weren't going to make this easy. The morning after my discovery, I arrived at Thompson Industries with a mixture of determination and dread. I planned to present my evidence to human resources and demand a full investigation, but I never got the chance. Richard had scheduled an emergency client meeting for 10:30 that morning, claiming there were urgent contract revisions needed for our 3 largest accounts. The conference room was packed with 15 department heads, 3 major clients, and Richard himself commanding attention from the head of the polished oak table. Marcus sat to his father's right, wearing the same navy suit he had worn to our wedding, though now it seemed like a costume designed to deceive me. Richard's voice boomed across the room as he outlined what he called serious concerns about information security and professional conduct. He detailed a pattern of leaked strategies, compromised client data, and unauthorized communications with competitor organizations. Every accusation was based on the fabricated emails Marcus had sent from my account. When Richard called my name and demanded I explain my corporate espionage activities, I felt every pair of eyes in the room focus on me. The clients looked confused and concerned. The department heads appeared shocked and disappointed. Marcus maintained his smirk while his father's voice grew louder and more accusatory with each sentence. That's when Richard grabbed the contract papers from the table, stood up, and hurled them directly at my face while screaming, "You're fired!" The papers scattered across the polished conference table as his voice echoed off the glass walls. The silence that followed was deafening, but as I stood to leave, something extraordinary happened. Sarah Chen, our head of finance, rose from her chair and walked toward the door. Then David Rodriguez from operations stood up. One by one, every single department head in that room abandoned their seats and followed me out of the conference room, leaving Richard Marcus and the bewildered client sitting alone. In the parking garage, 15 executives gathered around me in a circle that felt both protective and conspiratorial. Sarah Chen stepped forward as their unofficial spokesperson, her usually calm demeanor replaced by visible anger and determination. She was a woman in her early 40s, with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that made her indispensable to any organization. "Jody, we need to tell you something that's going to change everything you think you know about this company." Sarah began, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances we found ourselves in. "We've been waiting for the right moment to act, and what just happened in there gave us the opening we needed." David Rodriguez, a tall man with graying temples who had managed operations for 8 years, stepped closer to our impromptu circle. "We've been documenting Richard's illegal activities for 6 months," he said, pulling a thick folder from his briefcase. "What you just experienced wasn't about your work performance or any leaked information. It was about eliminating the one person who could expose the systematic corruption that runs through every level of this company." Sarah opened her laptop and showed me a series of audio recordings stored in encrypted files. "We've been recording board meetings, private conversations, and planning sessions where Richard explicitly discusses illegal activities," she explained. "Tax evasion, environmental violations, safety code breaches, bribery of city officials, and falsification of quarterly reports to federal regulators." The evidence was staggering. Audio recordings captured Richard bragging about paying off building inspectors to ignore safety violations at their manufacturing facilities. Document scans showed falsified environmental impact reports submitted to the Environmental Protection Agency hiding toxic waste dumping that had contaminated groundwater near 3 different factory sites. Jennifer Walsh, the Human Resources Director, revealed that Richard had been forcing department heads to manipulate employee records, hiding workplace injuries to avoid OSHA investigations and workers' compensation claims. "He threatened our jobs if we refused to participate," she said, her voice shaking with a combination of fear and relief at finally speaking the truth. Michael Thompson, no relation to Richard despite the shared surname, headed the legal department and had been secretly documenting contract fraud and bid manipulation. "Richard has been rigging government contracts for 5 years. He revealed, showing me copies of bribes paid to state legislators and falsified bidding documents. The company has stolen over $12 million in taxpayer-funded projects by submitting fraudulent low bids and then dramatically increasing costs after contracts were signed." The most shocking revelation came from Patricia Gonzalez, who managed the company's shipping and logistics operations. She pulled up shipping manifests on her tablet, highlighting cargo that didn't match official documentation. "Richard has been using our international shipping routes for human trafficking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Women and children from Central America are being transported in cargo containers supposedly filled with manufactured goods." As I listened to each department head reveal their piece of the massive criminal enterprise Richard had built, I realized that Thompson Industries wasn't just a corrupt business, but an organized crime operation masquerading as a legitimate company. The revenue I had helped generate through my marketing campaigns had been funding illegal activities I never could have imagined. Sarah Chen explained their plan with military precision. "We've been coordinating with federal investigators for 3 months, but we needed someone with access to Richard's personal files and communications," she said. "As his daughter-in-law, you have security clearances and family access that we don't have. The FBI needs someone who can get into his private office and retrieve documents that prove the connections between all these criminal activities." The executives had chosen to reveal their investigation now because my public firing gave them the perfect cover story. If I was supposedly terminated for corporate espionage, my continued presence in the building or access to sensitive areas would appear suspicious. But if I was secretly working with them to expose the real crimes, my actions would be justified as whistleblowing rather than corporate revenge. David Rodriguez handed me a secure cell phone with encrypted communication apps. "We understand this is overwhelming and dangerous," he said. "But you have the power to stop Richard from destroying more lives and communities. The women and children being trafficked through our shipping operations deserve justice, and the workers whose safety he's compromising need someone to speak for them." Looking at the faces of these 15 executives, I saw a mixture of courage, desperation, and hope. They had risked their careers, their financial security, and potentially their safety to document the truth about Richard Thompson's criminal enterprise. Now they were asking me to risk everything to help them complete their mission. I thought about the fabricated emails Marcus had sent to destroy my reputation, the months of gaslighting and manipulation, and the humiliation I had just endured in front of clients and colleagues. But more importantly, I thought about the victims of Richard's crimes who had no voice, no power, and no hope for justice without our intervention. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, and Sarah Chen smiled for the first time since we had gathered in that parking garage. That evening, I drove home through suburban streets that suddenly felt foreign and threatening, knowing that my entire marriage had been built on lies and manipulation. The two-story colonial house Marcus and I shared looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but I now understood it was a stage set designed to deceive me about the reality of my situation. The front door was unlocked, which immediately raised my suspicions since Marcus was obsessive about home security. I called his name as I entered, but the house echoed with silence. Our living room, decorated with furniture we had supposedly chosen together, felt like a museum of false memories. On the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker we used every morning, I found a manila envelope with my name written in Marcus's familiar handwriting. Inside were divorce papers, but as I began reading the documents, I discovered something that shattered the last foundation of my previous life. According to the legal papers, our marriage had never been legally valid. Marcus revealed that he had never filed our marriage certificate with the state after our wedding ceremony 3 years ago. While I believed we were legally married, he had deliberately kept our union unofficial, maintaining my status as an unknowing, unmarried partner with no legal rights to our shared assets or property. The divorce papers included a detailed financial breakdown showing that every asset I believed we owned together was actually titled solely in Marcus's name. The house I had helped choose and decorate belonged entirely to him. The joint bank account where I had deposited my paychecks for 3 years was legally his individual account, where I had simply been given access as an authorized user. But the devastating revelations didn't end with my fake marriage. Attached to the divorce documents were photographs that made my stomach lurch with disgust and betrayal. The images showed Marcus with 2 different women in intimate, clearly romantic settings. One set of photos was taken in a mountain cabin in Colorado, showing Marcus with a blonde woman and 2 young children building a snowman and opening Christmas presents around a tree. The second set of photographs captured Marcus on a beach in Texas with a brunette woman and a toddler, all 3 wearing matching shirts that read, "Thompson Family Reunion 2023. The woman was visibly pregnant, and Marcus's arm was wrapped possessively around her waist as they posed for sunset photos. A handwritten note attached to the photographs explained that these were his actual wives and families. The woman in Colorado was Lisa Thompson, whom he had married 5 years ago in a small ceremony in Denver. The woman in Texas was Maria Thompson, his wife of 4 years, currently expecting their second child. Both women believed they were his only wife, and both had legal marriage certificates filed with their respective state governments. I sank into one of our kitchen chairs, surrounded by evidence that my entire adult life had been an elaborate deception. Not only was I not married to Marcus, but I was essentially the unknowing third mistress in his collection of fake wives scattered across different states. The man I had shared a bed with, planned a future with, and trusted with my deepest fears had been systematically lying to multiple women while maintaining separate families and separate lives. A thick journal fell out of the envelope when I moved the photographs, and opening it revealed Marcus's handwritten plans for my destruction. The entries, dated over several months, detailed how the Thompson family had deliberately targeted me for my marketing expertise, while ensuring I remained legally powerless and financially dependent. One entry from 8 months ago read, "Dad thinks Jody's marketing skills could boost revenue by at least 30%, but we need to make sure she never gets too comfortable or powerful within the company. The fake marriage gives us complete control. She thinks she's building our future together, but she's actually just a temporary employee with no legal protections." Another entry from 6 months ago revealed their long-term strategy. "Once Jody's marketing campaign generates the revenue boost we need, we'll manufacture some crisis to justify firing her. The leaked information plan should work perfectly. She'll be discredited professionally, and since our marriage isn't legal, she'll have no claim to any assets or ongoing support. A clean exit with maximum benefit extraction." The most chilling entry was dated just 2 weeks ago. "Jody's getting too confident and independent. She's been asking questions about company finances and suggesting strategic changes that could interfere with Dad's arrangements. Time to accelerate the timeline. The sooner we eliminate her from the company and our lives, the safer our operations will be." Reading Marcus's calculated cold analysis of our relationship felt like discovering that someone had been slowly poisoning me while pretending to love me. Every romantic dinner, every shared laugh, every intimate moment had been part of an elaborate performance designed to extract my professional skills while preventing me from gaining any real power or security. I found my laptop and began documenting everything I had discovered, taking photographs of the divorce papers, the pictures of Marcus's other families, and relevant pages from his journal. As I worked, I realized that my situation was even more dangerous than I had initially understood. If Marcus had been maintaining multiple illegal marriages while systematically defrauding women in different states, he was guilty of bigamy, mail fraud, and potentially identity theft if he had used false information on marriage licenses or financial applications. The Thompson family's criminal enterprise extended beyond corporate corruption into personal fraud and manipulation that had destroyed the lives of multiple women and children. My phone buzzed with the text message from Sarah Chen. "Emergency meeting tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Coffee shop on Main Street across from the hospital. We've learned something about Richard that changes everything. Come alone and make sure you're not being followed." As I prepared for bed in a house that had never actually been my home, married to a man who was never actually my husband, I felt a strange sense of liberation beginning to emerge from the devastation. The life I thought I was losing had been an illusion designed to exploit me. The relationships I thought I was destroying had been fake constructions built to manipulate me. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming my identity, exposing the truth, and fighting back against people who had underestimated my strength and determination. Marcus and Richard Thompson had made the mistake of targeting someone who understood how to build things from nothing. And now I was going to use those same skills to build their destruction from the evidence of their crimes. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without fear or confusion, but with purpose and determination. The woman who woke up tomorrow would be very different from the woman who had discovered those emails just 2 days ago. The next morning, I met Sarah Chen at Murphy's Coffee House, a small family-owned establishment where the smell of fresh ground beans mixed with the quiet murmur of early morning conversations. Sarah arrived precisely at 7 a.m., carrying a leather portfolio that looked innocuous, but felt weighted with significance. She introduced me to Detective Laura Walsh, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp green eyes and the kind of calm confidence that suggested she had seen every type of criminal deception imaginable. Laura worked as a private investigator specializing in corporate crime and had been secretly collaborating with our group of executives for the past 2 months. The evidence your colleagues have gathered is substantial, Laura explained, spreading documents across our corner table. But we need access to Richard's private communications and personal files to establish the connections between all his criminal activities. The FBI needs proof that shows him directly ordering illegal actions, not just benefiting from them. Sarah revealed that my access codes to Thompson Industries were still active due to what appeared to be an administrative oversight in human resources. Since my termination had been announced in a client meeting rather than processed through normal HR channels, my security clearances and building access remained unchanged in the company's computer systems. We have a narrow window of opportunity, Laura explained. Richard is flying to Chicago this afternoon for a 3-day business conference and Marcus is accompanying him. That gives us access to Richard's private office when the executive floor will be mostly empty. The plan required precise timing and careful coordination. Laura had obtained building schematics and security schedules showing that Richard's personal office could be accessed through a service corridor that wasn't monitored by security cameras. My ID badge would get us through the main security checkpoints, and Sarah had created a cover story about retrieving personal items from my former workspace. That evening, we entered Thompson Industries through the employee parking garage at 8:15 p.m., when the building was nearly empty except for the overnight cleaning crew and a single security guard monitoring the main lobby. Sarah and I walked confidently through the hallways, carrying empty file boxes and speaking casually about organizing my personal belongings while Laura followed separately using a temporary visitor badge Sarah had arranged. Richard's corner office was a monument to ego and intimidation with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars and walls, lined with awards, photographs, and certificates celebrating his business achievements. But behind this impressive facade, we discovered evidence of crimes that shocked even Detective Walsh's experienced perspective. His personal safe, hidden behind a painting of 19th-century factory workers, contained documents that revealed the true scope of Richard's criminal enterprise. The safe's combination was Marcus's birthday, which I knew from 3 years of fake marriage celebrations, followed by the year Thompson Industries was founded. Inside, we found Richard's personal correspondence dating back 20 years, including evidence of his first major crime. In 1998, Richard's business partner James Morrison had discovered Richard embezzling funds from their shared manufacturing company and planned to expose the fraud to federal investigators. A handwritten letter from Morrison to Richard, dated 3 days before Morrison's death, threatened to turn over evidence of embezzlement, tax fraud, and safety violations to the FBI unless Richard immediately confessed and made financial restitution to their defrauded clients. Morrison's letter included copies of financial documents proving Richard had stolen over $2 million from government contracts. The most chilling discovery was a folder labeled Morrison Problem, Final Solution, containing photographs that made my hands shake as I examined them. The images showed Richard tampering with brake lines on Morrison's car, taken with a telephoto lens from someone's perspective across a parking garage. A handwritten note attached to the photos read, "Insurance investigation concluded accidental brake failure. No further inquiry planned." Additional documents revealed Richard's systematic intimidation of Morrison's widow and children after the funeral. Bank records showed monthly payments to Mrs. Elizabeth Morrison, with attached notes threatening her family's safety if she ever questioned the circumstances of her husband's death or attempted to investigate Thompson Industries' business practices. Detective Walsh photographed every document while Sarah and I searched Richard's computer files, using passwords we found written in a small notebook hidden in his desk drawer. The computer contained email correspondence with organized crime figures in 3 different cities, detailing money laundering operations, drug trafficking coordination, and human trafficking logistics. The human trafficking operation was more extensive and horrifying than any of us had imagined. Richard's shipping company moved women and children from Central America through a network of warehouses in Texas, Colorado, and Illinois. The victims were promised legitimate jobs in American factories, but instead were forced into domestic servitude, agricultural labor, and prostitution. Email records showed Richard personally negotiating prices for cargo delivery with customers who were clearly purchasing human beings. One message from 6 months ago confirmed the delivery of 12 young women and 3 children to addresses in suburban Denver, with payment arrangements disguised as consulting fees and equipment purchases. As we documented these horrors, I realized that my marketing success had been unwittingly funding kidnapping, slavery, and murder. The 37% revenue increase I had achieved through innovative social media campaigns had generated millions of dollars that Richard used to expand his human trafficking operations and bribe government officials to ignore his crimes. But our investigation was interrupted by the sound of elevator doors opening on our floor. Detective Walsh immediately recognized the security risk and began quickly packing documents back into the safe while Sarah cleared the computer screen and gathered our photography equipment. Heavy footsteps approached Richard's office, accompanied by voices I didn't recognize. Laura signaled for us to hide behind Richard's desk, while she positioned herself near the door with what appeared to be a small weapon drawn from her jacket. The voices grew closer, and I could hear someone discussing cleaning up loose ends and eliminating potential witnesses. Through the gap under Richard's office door, I could see shadows moving in the hallway, suggesting at least 3 people were searching the executive floor. We remained hidden for 25 minutes that felt like hours, listening to systematic searches of nearby offices and increasingly frustrated conversations about not finding what they were looking for. When the sounds finally faded and the elevator doors closed, Detective Walsh confirmed that we needed to leave immediately and assumed that our investigation had been discovered. As we gathered our evidence and prepared to exit through the service corridor, I realized that Richard's criminal enterprise was more dangerous and more extensive than we had initially understood. We weren't just dealing with corporate corruption or financial fraud, but with organized crime figures who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill anyone who threatened their operations. Walking through the darkened hallways toward our exit, I understood that there was no turning back from this investigation. We had evidence that could destroy Richard's empire and save countless future victims, but we also had painted targets on our backs that would remain there until either we succeeded in exposing him or he succeeded in eliminating us. The evidence we had gathered that night would either set us free or get us killed. And I was beginning to understand that those might be the only 2 possible outcomes of our fight against the Thompson family's criminal empire. The next morning brought news that confirmed our worst fears about the danger we now faced. Detective Laura Walsh was found beaten unconscious in her car outside her apartment complex, with clear signs that her attack had been both personal and professional. The perpetrators had searched her vehicle, stolen her laptop and case files, and left her with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. Sarah Chen received a phone call from the hospital where Laura was being treated, and the message was terrifyingly clear. Someone had identified our investigation team and was willing to use violence to stop us from exposing Richard's crimes. Laura had been discovered because her license plate number was recorded by security cameras near Thompson Industries, linking her to our nighttime break-in. I immediately went into hiding, staying at Sarah's guest house in a quiet residential neighborhood, while we figured out how to proceed with an investigation that had become a matter of survival. Sarah's husband was a retired police officer who understood the gravity of our situation and helped us establish security protocols and emergency communication procedures. David Rodriguez and three other executives joined us at the safe house, bringing additional evidence they had gathered from their departments and sharing intelligence about Richard's reaction to discovering that his office had been searched. According to Jennifer Walsh from Human Resources, Richard had returned from his Chicago business trip early and was conducting what he called internal security reviews of all department heads. The security reviews were actually interrogations designed to identify who had access to Richard's personal office and which employees might be cooperating with outside investigators. Richard had hired a private security firm with connections to organized crime figures, and these investigators were using intimidation tactics that crossed every line of legal employee relations. Michael Thompson from the legal department reported that Richard had accused him of stealing confidential files and threatened to have him arrested for corporate espionage if he didn't reveal who else was involved in undermining company security. When Michael refused to provide names or admit to any wrongdoing, Richard's security team searched his home office and confiscated his personal computer equipment. Patricia Gonzalez, who managed shipping and logistics, described similar harassment and threats from Richard's security investigators. They had followed her to her children's school, questioned her neighbors about her suspicious activities, and even contacted her ex-husband attempting to gather information that could be used to blackmail her into silence. As we shared these experiences, it became clear that Richard was systematically targeting each member of our investigation team with personalized intimidation strategies designed to exploit our individual vulnerabilities and fears. He was using his knowledge of our families, our financial situations, and our personal histories to create maximum psychological pressure. But the most shocking escalation came on our third day in the safe house, when Marcus appeared at our front door with two men in hospital uniforms, carrying official-looking paperwork and a wheelchair. Sarah's husband immediately recognized the situation as dangerous and called for backup while we observed the confrontation through window blinds. Marcus was presenting what appeared to be court-ordered psychiatric commitment papers, claiming that I had suffered a complete mental breakdown following my termination from Thompson Industries and posed a danger to myself and others. The men with him introduced themselves as psychiatric orderlies, with authority to transport me to a secure mental health facility for involuntary evaluation and treatment. The commitment papers, which appeared legitimate at first glance, described me as delusional paranoid and potentially violent, citing false witness statements from Marcus claiming I had threatened him with physical harm and expressed suicidal thoughts. The document was signed by Dr. Andrew Phillips, a psychiatrist whose signature authorized my involuntary hospitalization for an indefinite period. Sarah's husband, using his law enforcement experience, immediately identified several irregularities in the paperwork that suggested it was fabricated or obtained through fraudulent means. The court seal appeared to be photocopied rather than embossed. The judge's signature didn't match public records, and the timeline for psychiatric evaluation was impossibly short, given normal legal procedures. While Sarah's husband stalled Marcus and the orderlies with questions about proper documentation and legal procedures, Sarah contacted Detective Walsh at the hospital and learned that Dr. Andrew Phillips was a corrupt psychiatrist who had been investigated multiple times for accepting bribes to falsify psychiatric evaluations and commitment orders. The plan became clear. Richard and Marcus intended to have me declared mentally incompetent and imprisoned in a psychiatric facility where my testimony about their crimes would be discredited as the ravings of an unstable person. If they could establish that I was delusional and paranoid, any evidence I presented to federal investigators would be dismissed as unreliable witness testimony. More sinisterly, psychiatric commitment would give them complete control over my communication with the outside world. In a secure mental health facility, my phone calls could be monitored, my visitors could be restricted, and my access to legal representation could be limited or eliminated entirely. They could keep me imprisoned indefinitely by claiming my condition wasn't improving and I remained a danger to myself and others. As Marcus became more aggressive in demanding access to the house, claiming he was concerned about my welfare and had legal authority to remove me from what he called an unstable environment, Sarah received an urgent phone call that changed everything about our situation. The call was from FBI Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, who had been secretly investigating Thompson Industries for 8 months as part of a multi-state operation targeting human trafficking and organized crime networks. Agent Martinez revealed that our investigation had actually been coordinated with federal authorities from the beginning, and Detective Walsh was working undercover as part of a larger sting operation. "We've been using your situation to gather final evidence for federal indictments," Agent Martinez explained through Sarah's encrypted phone. "The commitment papers are fake, and we've been recording Marcus's attempts to have you illegally imprisoned. We needed him to reveal the extent of the Thompson family's willingness to commit additional crimes to cover up their existing operations. The orderlies with Marcus weren't actually psychiatric facility employees, but hired criminals with fake credentials, and their attempt to forcibly remove me from the safe house was being recorded by FBI surveillance teams positioned around the neighborhood. Marcus's presence at the house was actually the culmination of months of federal investigation designed to catch the Thompson family in the act of committing conspiracy kidnapping and falsifying legal documents. As FBI agents surrounded the house and placed Marcus and his accomplices under arrest, I realized that our investigation had been part of a much larger federal operation that extended far beyond Thompson Industries. Richard's criminal enterprise was connected to organized crime networks in multiple states, and our evidence gathering had helped federal investigators understand the full scope of his illegal activities. Agent Martinez explained that simultaneous raids were being conducted at Richard's mansion, Thompson Industries headquarters, and properties belonging to his criminal associates in Colorado, Texas, and Illinois. The evidence we had gathered from Richard's personal safe, combined with months of federal surveillance and the cooperation of other whistleblowers, had provided prosecutors with enough evidence to pursue federal racketeering charges that could result in life imprisonment. Watching Marcus being handcuffed and placed in the back of an FBI vehicle, I felt a mixture of relief, vindication, and overwhelming gratitude that our dangerous investigation had finally reached a conclusion where justice might actually be served. The man who had systematically destroyed my career, manipulated my emotions, and attempted to have me illegally imprisoned was finally facing consequences for his actions. But even as I celebrated this victory, I understood that the legal battle was just beginning, and my testimony would be crucial to ensuring that Richard and Marcus received appropriate punishment for crimes that had destroyed countless lives across multiple states. As Marcus was being arrested, FBI agent Martinez explained that simultaneous raids were happening across 3 states as part of what she described as one of the largest organized crime takedowns in federal law enforcement history. The Thompson family's criminal enterprise had been under investigation for over a year, involving coordination between the FBI Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the Environmental Protection Agency, and state attorney general offices in Colorado, Texas, and Illinois. The raids began precisely at 6:30 a.m., ensuring that evidence couldn't be destroyed and suspects couldn't coordinate their responses. At Thompson Industries headquarters, federal agents seized computer servers, financial records, and shipping manifests dating back 10 years. The evidence revealed money laundering operations involving over $47 million in illegal profits from human trafficking, drug distribution, and environmental crime. Richard's mansion was simultaneously searched by a team of federal agents who discovered a hidden room containing detailed records of his criminal operations, including photographs and personal information about trafficking victims, correspondence with organized crime figures, and financial accounts in offshore banks designed to hide illegal profits. The hidden room also contained weapons fake identification documents and plans for eliminating potential witnesses to his crimes. The most shocking discoveries came from raids on warehouses in Colorado and Texas that were supposedly used for legitimate shipping and storage operations. Federal agents found evidence that these facilities had been used as temporary holding sites for trafficking victims, including makeshift living quarters, restraint devices, and documentation showing how many women and children had been processed through these locations. Agent Martinez showed me photographs from the warehouse raids that made me understand the full horror of what my unknowing marketing success had been funding. Young women and children had been imprisoned in shipping containers and warehouse buildings, forced to work in agricultural operations and domestic servitude while living in conditions that violated every standard of human decency and legal protection. The Chicago warehouse contained records showing that over 200 victims had been trafficked through Richard's network in the past 3 years alone. These women and children had been promised legitimate employment and legal immigration assistance, but instead were sold to customers throughout the Midwest who used them as unpaid laborers in restaurants, farms, and private homes. Media coverage began immediately as news of the raids spread across national news networks. Thompson Industries' stock price collapsed within hours as investors learned about the federal charges and the scope of the criminal enterprise that had been operating under the facade of a legitimate manufacturing company. Local news stations broadcast live footage of Richard being arrested at Chicago O'Hare Airport as he attempted to board a flight to Switzerland, where investigators believed he maintained additional financial accounts and property designed to facilitate his escape from American law enforcement. The images of Richard in handcuffs shouting threats at reporters while federal agents led him through the airport became iconic symbols of the case. Marcus faced charges that included conspiracy to commit kidnapping, falsifying legal documents, bigamy, fraud, and money laundering. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including the fake psychiatric commitment papers, recordings of his attempts to illegally imprison me, and financial records showing his participation in the family's criminal operations. The bigamy charges were particularly significant because they revealed the extent of Marcus's systematic fraud against multiple women across different states. Lisa Thompson in Colorado and Maria Thompson in Texas both contacted federal investigators after learning about Marcus's arrest, and their testimonies revealed similar patterns of manipulation, financial exploitation, and emotional abuse. Both women had been targeted for their professional skills and financial assets, just as I had been. Lisa was a software engineer whose technical expertise had helped Marcus develop encrypted communication systems for the family's criminal operations. Maria was an accountant whose financial knowledge had been exploited to help launder money through legitimate business accounts. The federal investigation revealed that the Thompson family had used fake marriages and manipulated relationships as tools for criminal recruitment, targeting accomplished women whose skills could be exploited while ensuring they remained legally powerless and financially dependent. We were all victims of the same systematic predatory behavior designed to extract our professional capabilities while eliminating our ability to seek justice or legal protection. Public reaction to the case was intense and widespread, particularly as details emerged about the human trafficking operations and the environmental crimes that had poisoned communities near Thompson Industries facilities. Families of trafficking victims organized protests demanding justice for their missing daughters and sisters, while environmental groups highlighted the connection between corporate corruption and community health problems. The case became a national symbol of how organized crime could operate behind the facade of legitimate business exploiting regulatory gaps and corrupt officials to commit crimes that destroyed lives while generating enormous profits for perpetrators who appeared to be respectable members of the business community. Social media coverage amplified public outrage as people shared stories about corporate corruption in their own communities and demanded stronger enforcement of laws protecting workers, immigrants, and environmental safety. The hashtag Thompson Crimes trended for weeks as people documented their own experiences with corporate fraud and systematic exploitation. Congressional hearings were scheduled to examine regulatory failures that had allowed the Thompson family's criminal enterprise to operate for years without detection. Representatives from the Environmental Protection Agency, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Department of Labor were called to testify about how their agencies had failed to identify and stop crimes that were happening in plain sight. As I prepared to testify before federal prosecutors about my experiences with Marcus and Richard, I realized that our investigation had exposed problems that extended far beyond one corrupt family business. The Thompson case revealed systematic failures in corporate oversight, environmental protection, immigration enforcement, and human trafficking prevention that had enabled criminals to operate with impunity for years. My testimony would not only help ensure appropriate punishment for the people who had betrayed and exploited me, but also contribute to reforms that could prevent similar crimes from destroying other families and communities in the future. 6 months after that humiliating morning in the Thompson Industries conference room, I stood in federal court as the key witness in a trial that had captured national attention and become a symbol of justice finally prevailing over organized crime and corporate corruption. The trial lasted 3 weeks, during which prosecutors presented evidence that shocked even experienced federal judges and attorneys. Richard Thompson was convicted on 47 federal charges, including murder, racketeering, human trafficking, money laundering, environmental crimes, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, calling his crimes a systematic assault on human dignity and community safety that represents the worst possible abuse of corporate power and family trust. Marcus received 25 years in federal prison for his role in the criminal enterprise, including charges related to his attempts to have me illegally committed to a psychiatric facility. The fake bigamy marriages resulted in additional fraud convictions, and his 2 other victims, Lisa and Maria, successfully sued him for damages that helped them rebuild their lives after years of manipulation and exploitation. Dr. Andrew Phillips, the corrupt psychiatrist who had signed fake commitment papers, lost his medical license and received 10 years in prison for falsifying legal documents and accepting bribes. The psychiatric facility that had agreed to accept me based on fabricated paperwork was shut down after investigators discovered they had been illegally imprisoning other victims of organized crime operations. The civil litigation that followed the criminal trial resulted in a $12 million settlement for me through the FBI's asset forfeiture program and federal whistleblower compensation fund. The money came from Richard's seized assets, including his mansion offshore bank accounts and Thompson Industries properties that had been used to commit crimes. I used a significant portion of the settlement money to start Martinez Chen Marketing Solutions with Sarah Chen and 8 other executives who had walked out of that conference room with me. Our company specializes in ethical marketing for nonprofit organizations with a particular focus on groups working with human trafficking survivors, environmental justice advocates, and corporate whistleblower protection organizations. Our first major client was the National Center for Domestic Violence and Corporate Abuse, a nonprofit organization that helps women escape exploitative relationships involving financial manipulation and professional sabotage. The marketing campaigns we developed for them have helped thousands of women recognize warning signs of systematic manipulation and access resources for legal protection and economic independence. Working with trafficking survivors has been the most meaningful aspect of my new career. Many of the women who were rescued from Thompson Industries operations have become advocates and activists using their experiences to help law enforcement identify and stop similar criminal enterprises. Their courage and determination to transform their trauma into tools for helping others has inspired me to approach my own healing process with purpose and hope. The environmental cleanup efforts resulting from the Thompson Industries case have become a model for community-based restoration projects that combine corporate accountability with local empowerment. The communities that were poisoned by Richard's illegal dumping operations received substantial financial settlements that have funded clean water systems, health monitoring programs, and educational initiatives about environmental justice. Lisa Thompson and Maria Thompson, Marcus's other victims, have both become close friends and colleagues in my advocacy work. We've testified together at congressional hearings about the need for stronger laws protecting women from systematic financial exploitation and fake marriage schemes used by organized crime operations. Lisa now runs a cybersecurity nonprofit that helps domestic violence survivors protect their digital privacy and communications from abusive partners and family members. Maria has become an expert in financial fraud detection and works with federal investigators to identify money laundering operations disguised as legitimate businesses. The 15 executives who walked out of that conference room with me have all found meaningful work that aligns with their values and utilizes their professional skills to create positive social impact. Sarah Chen was featured on the cover of Business Week magazine for her leadership in ethical corporate governance, and David Rodriguez now directs a worker safety advocacy organization that has prevented hundreds of workplace injuries and deaths. As I reflect on the journey from that moment of humiliation to this point of purpose and empowerment, I realize that the worst betrayal of my life became the catalyst for discovering my true calling and building relationships based on genuine trust and shared values rather than manipulation and exploitation. The morning I watched Richard throw those papers in my face, I felt powerless, isolated, and devastated. Today, I wake up every day knowing that my work helps protect vulnerable people from predators who exploit trust and manipulate relationships for criminal purposes. I speak regularly at conferences for businesswomen about recognizing and responding to systematic manipulation in professional and personal relationships. My presentations focus on how corporate corruption and domestic abuse often intersect, creating situations where victims are exploited both professionally and personally by people who appear to be legitimate authority figures. The most rewarding aspect of my advocacy work is receiving letters and emails from women who have used the information I share to escape dangerous situations, expose corrupt employers, or rebuild their lives after experiencing betrayal and exploitation. Each story reminds me that speaking truth about my experiences creates ripple effects that can protect and empower people I may never meet. My office wall displays dozens of thank you letters from trafficking survivors, domestic violence advocates, environmental justice activists, and other women who have found strength and resources through the work we do at Martinez Chen Marketing Solutions. These letters represent the real victory that emerged from Richard and Marcus's attempt to destroy my voice and credibility. The Thompson Industries case led to federal legislation strengthening penalties for corporate human trafficking and creating better protection for whistleblowers who expose organized crime operations. The changes in law and enforcement procedures that resulted from our investigation will help prevent future victims from suffering the way so many people suffered under Richard's criminal enterprise. Looking back, I understand that Richard and Marcus Thompson underestimated my capacity for resilient strategic thinking and moral courage. They saw me as a useful tool who could be discarded when I was no longer convenient, but they failed to recognize that the same skills I used to build successful marketing campaigns could also be used to build their destruction and my own liberation. The woman who was humiliated in that conference room was someone who believed that her worth depended on other people's approval and that her security required other people's protection. The woman I am today understands that my worth comes from my integrity and my security comes from my ability to stand up for what's right, regardless of the personal cost. Sometimes the people who try to destroy us actually set us free to become who we were always meant to be. Richard and Marcus's betrayal freed me from the illusion that my happiness depended on their approval or acceptance. Their attempt to silence me amplified my voice in ways that have reached thousands of people who needed to hear that survival is possible and justice can prevail. I want to ask you something that I hope will inspire your own reflection and action. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone tried to use their power or authority to silence you or discredit your truth? If so, how did you find the courage to speak up? And what advice would you give to others facing similar challenges? Your experiences and insights could help someone who is struggling to find their voice or wondering whether fighting for justice is worth the risk. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, I hope you'll like this video, subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share it with anyone who might benefit from knowing that they're not alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, and for being part of a community that believes in supporting each other through the process of healing, growing, and building lives that reflect our values and dreams. Together, we can create a world where people like Richard and Marcus Thompson can't prey on trust and exploit vulnerability because all of us are watching out for each other and ready to speak truth to power when it's needed most.